Welcome to Maverick Mindcast. My guest today is Richard Willett. He's a filmmaker, podcaster, presenter, conspiracy researcher, and enthusiast. He's the director of the documentary Plugged In, The Toxicity of Social Media. And he also worked on Extreme Danger, Extreme Hypnosis. He is the presenter for Deep Dive, that's on Iconic. And his podcast, which I think is amazing. You should check it out if you haven't already, Glitch in the Code, and also WTAF that he does with Gareth Ike. Richard, welcome, and thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for asking me. It's nice to be asked. I don't get asked very often, so it's nice to be asked to chat about these things, because I'm usually on the other end of it. So yeah, I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure. As a new podcaster, I have to say I am very inspired because I love the questions you ask and the way you conduct your interviews, and you have some pretty amazing guests. So I always learn a lot, not only from your guests, but from the different kinds of questions that you ask and the different kinds of, I don't know, you just present different ways of looking at something. And I even see sometimes your guests have those kind of epiphany moments and they're like, yeah, I guess you could say that. So I'm just so happy I'm able to have you here. I kind of want to just start from the beginning. If you can just share a little bit about how you started your career in filmmaking, how you got into podcasting. Were you always doing that? We'll start there.
Yeah, I've got I've got an honours degree in film and TV production, which I did 2005, something like that. So I was in my mid-20s then, but I've always made film. I was actually into music before, so I wanted to be working in a recording studio. Then I realised it literally was just pressing buttons, and there was no creativity at all. So I thought, oh, this is just naff. So I went to work in radio, found that was the same as well, just pressing buttons. Like, this is literally just watching the clock round. So there was no creativity in any of these things. So I went and did a film and TV degree. After doing performing arts, which is odd because I'm not a stagey person, although I enjoyed the writing part of it. And I actually got a lot out of that. They offered me a job afterwards to run the TV studio there, and I did that for a few years. And then I ended up doing independent films, working for, because when this was, I went to work at the BBC for a little while, about 6-7 months. Started to sort of find out that the mainstream media wasn't great. It wasn't what I thought it was. It was pushing buttons, but also it was a propaganda machine. You could tell they were looking for the side, pushing narratives. And even then, actually, I didn't really know any of this stuff that I know now. They used to be 11 years ago now. So I didn't really know about much of this stuff now. I'd read David's books, but I still didn't understand it at all. But I knew there was something wrong. I knew the types of people that they wanted there weren't me. And that was quite apparent after about 6 months. I'd stopped going there. I stopped I was working with the young kids down like they had a basement there where they would basically indoctrinate kids to go up into the main part of it there. And when you look back at it, it's actually quite weird. The people were nice, by the way. It's just the culture of being there. I was like, I can't deal with this at all. I had the option to go to London to work in TV. It's like I probably would have just destroyed myself in London with all of the drinking during the daytime and all of that stuff. So it's like, I can't do that. So I ended up being a youth worker for a few years. Didn't particularly want to be doing that, but I enjoyed it. I enjoyed working with the SEN children. That was great. And then I came back to doing this, and as I was doing all those stuff, I was still making little bits of content here and there. I was doing comedy shows and just making little documentaries here and there. But then I ended up working with a guy called Brian Harvey, who's from a pop band called E17 that were Take That for Rivals in the 90s. And he had a very interesting story. Unfortunately, the film didn't come about. He wanted to make a different film than I did. And he's quite he's quite an erratic person. He's had a lot of trauma in his life. Incredibly intelligent man, incredibly talented man, not just as a singer, but as a filmmaker, as a writer. And it's just unfortunate that he's had the trauma that he's had to go through. But he's actually, underneath a lot of the erratic behavior, he's actually a really nice guy, and a very clever guy and very clued up on this stuff. So although we kind of had a falling out, I've got a lot of respect for the man. He's been through a different life. And what I was interested was he was in the limelight, and what they did to him in this country was they made out for him to be a really bad person, because he spoke about taking ecstasy in the late 90s, and they used it against him, and he was in front of the papers. They were speaking about him in Parliament, and he's just a guy. He actually lives in the house he grew up in still. and they really kind of sacrificed him just for no reason at all. There was a lot of stuff going on in the background, but the conspiracy stuff started to come back in around about then, and that was about 6-7 years ago. And he had chats with David Icke. He was involved with some of the research that goes on there, a lot of the paedophilia that goes on in Houses of Parliament here, Dolphin Square, and you started to look into all this stuff. And that's about 7 years ago, all this information started to come out on the dark side of all this stuff. And then I started to just work with different people in the alternative media quite quick off the bat of that. And I was doing Glitching the Code way before that, I think. And I just started to talk to different people in the alternative media as a way to get to meet people. And that was it. I just wanted to do, I was a documentary filmmaker, so I wanted to interview people, and it just kind of reared off into the alternative media, because the mainstream media was a no-go area for anyone who wanted to speak to anyone authentically or get a decent chat on. So I was already making films, and Glitching the Code just carried on. I met some great people, and eventually I ended up speaking with Gareth Icke. I actually went to one of his dad's talks, met Gareth there, and we did a podcast a few weeks later, and we've become mates since then. We traveled up to Scotland, did filming together, and then I ended up working with his brother. It was all kind of very organic, really, really organic. But I always had an interest in this stuff, and I knew a lot about the conspiracy side, but I didn't understand how vast it goes into all these different areas, and you kind of can't comprehend how many different areas this touches. So that was kind of like the whistle-stop tour of how I kind of fell into conspiracy land, really. But I was always heading this way anyway, because the world has always seemed mental to me, and I've always stood back and just looked at it and go, this is fucking insane, isn't it? And I tried to find other people that felt the same way, and that's where it led me to work with David Icke. That's basically what I ended up here.
Yeah, that's pretty much you can't get any better than that, I'd say.
Not really, no. And a lot of people misunderstand him, and they forget that he's a granddad, and he's a dad, and he's a person, and he's someone who's done this research for 30 years, and he's changed his views on things. He's written over 30 books, and they forget he's a granddad. I was in the office last week. I came back from Derby, and he's there with his grandson, and he's like, hello, it's granddad. And you're thinking David Icke speaking to his grandson saying, hello, it's granddad. People forget there's humans behind there's people that do this research, and they forget that. And I see him get a lot of stick. I watch videos all the time of other researchers giving him stick, and you just think we're all people trying to figure this out. None of us have any certain answers. So, and he never does that. You never find him bad mouthing other people, other researchers, which I really respect.
Well, some people, I think, I don't know, why they do what they do, but sometimes I feel because he is so in line with his truth, and he just speaks it unapologetically. We were talking about this before we started recording. I still feel there's a lot of alternative, I call them mainstream alternative outlets that are bound to certain narratives. And even if they feel they want to go outside of that, they won't, because they have a specific niche that they cater to, or, it's more beneficial for them to uphold a certain, narrative or storyline. And he's never really attached himself to any of that. And I think sometimes people, I think sometimes when you look at people, it's a reflection of yourself a little, and that makes you feel uncomfortable if they're doing something that you're kind of not doing, but you maybe want to be doing. I don't know. Like I said, I can't get into these people's minds, but I definitely feel like he's one of the only ones out there that's more well-known, who's just anything that he feels is a truth and something that he wants to keep, put out there, he just stands by it. He doesn't have to worry about, that I won't be able to sell this, or people won't buy my books, or, I may get less views. And I still feel like that translates from the mainstream media into the alternative media too.
Oh,
There's
it absolutely does.
there.
Yeah. And it's also the other things when you watch something, and it happens to me, and I get the feeling when you watch something and it goes against what you believe to be true, especially if you spend a lot of time researching it and it's totally the opposite, you get that initial feeling of anger, of you're wrong, I've done it, and then you have to hold on to that and go, hang on a minute, I actually don't know if I'm right. And we all get that. I see a lot of people stick to them. They double down, and especially like if you look into the religious aspect of this, or the New Age aspect, or the Kabbalah, or you look into Gnosticism, and you look into all these different ways of, and there's simply ways of understanding why we're here and what we're doing here. That's all they are. None of them are true. None of them know. We don't know if any of them are true. And anyone who tells you otherwise is lying, because you don't know. These are just ways of understanding the human condition. And but when you read one and it goes against what you believe, you get that initial, oh, fuck off, you're an idiot, or you know what I mean? And I get that. And I think there's something we need to, that's a reflection of us. And I've seen this in the, as you say, the COVID thing, and we can see it now as people just doubling down on what they think, and the virtue signaling, and the things that the lengths people go to try and cognitively block out something they don't want to be true, even when it's blatantly true. They will do it, and we all do it, and we're all subjected to it, and that's a real kind of fight that we'll always have. And especially if you're doing research over a long period of time, if you have the same beliefs that you did, and you say you researched for 35, 40 years, if you have the same beliefs you did 40 years ago as you do now, then you've wasted 40 years of your life. You're supposed to drop things, pick them up, and go, hang on a minute, that was a bit silly. Like, you know what I mean? You're not the same person you were when you were 5, when you're 45. Hopefully you've progressed a bit and you don't believe the same things. And it's the ego, the ability to just go, well, that was just nonsense, wasn't it? But I enjoyed the process of it. It's like trying to hold water. It's trying to grasp something that's not graspable. None of this is graspable. And I think that's what happens in the alternative media and the conspiracy research, or any sort of esoteric research, is that you're trying to find truth when actually what you will never know for certain any of this stuff. These are unanswerable questions. And that needs to, for me, that needs something I have to keep reminding myself, is that actually probably never going to know anything for sure, until, at least while I'm still alive. But I want to enjoy the process of understanding it, and I want to enjoy the adventure of trying to learn these things. And that I have to remind myself is that I'm not my beliefs. I'm someone who's just having a look and having a play, and then I might find something different, and I might have a look at that and pick that up, put that down. Children teach you that. So I think with David, he's very good at kind of doing that and going, have a look at this and dropping that. And people find that, go, oh, well, he said this then. But it's 30 years ago.
But he never lived the Wogan thing down. It's so funny. It's like, oh,
well, they even misquote that.
God? It's like,
I've heard people misquote that who know better, who cut the last few seconds off the sentence. And I know they know better because I've had chats with them about this. Didn't say he was the son of God. Wogan asked, do you think you're the son of God? And he said, yes, we all are.
Yeah.
But they cut the last, and I know people that know better and have even gone ahead and even cut that bit off purposely to fit their narrative. And that to me speaks volumes. And that's when I will cut off things with people, when I know they're purposely cutting things out to just try and fit their own narrative. Because that's just deceitful, and I haven't got any time for that. And I see it across the board with people doing that. Just say, okay, I don't understand why you would do that unless it kind of frightens you that you might be wrong. And that's probably as far as it goes. So, but to getting into this information is incredible, because it's like playing as a kid. It's just when the ego gets in the way and you want to be right, but you're never gonna know. You're never gonna know. You aren't. You're just not. You might think you do, or you might want to, but you're just not. And that's okay.
Frustrating though sometimes. Like, I had a question for you, because I was just thinking, the saying, question everything. And I think a lot of conspiracy researchers, they say that.
Yeah.
And I agree to a certain extent, because when I first started going down this rabbit hole, I just kept doing that. And it actually became self-destructive. It was almost like maddening, because then when you start, like, where do you feel is the point where you can stop a little questioning? Because it's like, oh, well, I'll question that, but then what about that? And well, that too, and then it just becomes this snowball effect. And then sometimes you get to the point where you have no convictions. You don't really have any grasp of the world.
Yeah, it's a really good point. It is a really, really good point. And I suppose that's the danger of looking into these things. I get that. And I think that's a very good question and a really good point. And I don't know if I have a solid answer of where I stop. I kind of don't attach myself to the outcome of it. I'm not trying to be right. I'm trying to understand it. And I'm trying to get to the point where I'm 80 and I can go to my son and go, look, all this weird stuff I know. Look at all this weird shit I had a look at. And then go, Here you go, make up what your weird old man thinks. I think, again, you're trying to grasp a truth that is so beyond our ability to grasp that you are going to constantly just be trying to grasp water. But then I suppose whatever it suits you, what outcomes do you want from this? How do you want to see the world? Do you know what I mean? If you don't want to know, the unfortunate thing is once you start knowing this stuff, you can't unknow it. And that's the Pandora's box
That's the
thing.
part. Yes,
Yeah.
some can, I feel, some do. But yeah, if you're really like centered and you know what you're about and your values are, a certain way, it's really hard to unknow it. I think perhaps maybe it just boils down to knowing yourself and then understanding work, because not to keep bringing him in, but David, he says that the mind, we're always in the mind. When you go into the heart just knows. So maybe that's where your line stops for questioning, question everything, question this, question that. No, my heart says this feels right to me. This truth, this feels like a truth to me. You kind of take it and you go about your business.
And then 10 years later, you might decide that it doesn't anymore. And you might decide what did then doesn't work for you now.
Definitely.
And that has to be all right with you too. Or you'll end up driving yourself crazy then. It's like having a relationship. You might be with someone in your 20s that you really liked, and then by the time you're 40, you realize that we have nothing in common and I can't stand her at all.
Yeah.
So you got to be like, what will suit you at one point might not suit you at another point. So you're constantly just juggling these things. For me, it's kind of like I suppose as I said, I think I said before, it's the only truth I know is that I'm experiencing this. I'm sitting here, I'm chatting to you, and I don't know anything else for sure. And I don't need to know anything else for sure. Everything else is beyond what I can actually grasp and hold onto. But there's a lot of things I believe, but I know it's me doing the believing. I know it's my want to believe it. And that's okay. I like that. That's fine. But I still got aware that I'm doing the believing. I know that I read all these things and I know all these, and I've got all this knowledge in my head, but I don't know if it's true or not. I only know what I experience. I don't know if I can't get inside someone's head. I don't know. You see a lot of these conspiracy researchers and people saying this person's a shill and this person's out to get him, but you have no idea. We don't have any idea what's going on in someone's head, so you will never know what someone else's intention is unless you hear them say it out and they explain it to you. And even then, you don't know whether they're telling you the truth or not. So you'll never know anyone else's intention other than your own. So you drive yourself crazy trying to figure out where someone's trying to. This is the other issue with conspiracy, is that everything becomes a conspiracy, but everybody becomes a conspirator as well. And you can drive yourself crazy. So at some point, you've just got to laugh at it. And I think that's where humor comes in. Laughing at the madness of it all helps. That's why we do the What I Show, me and Gaz, because it's just mad and funny. And for me, as an outsider who comes in and just looks at this stuff and just chose to get into it, that's why being around like Gaz and Jamie is fascinating for me, because they grew up around this stuff. It was always part of their psyche, especially Jamie. Gaz was about 10, I think, when his dad started to get into this stuff. So he saw the world before it. His dad was a well-known sports pundit and footballer. And then suddenly overnight, Gaz had to change over. And that fascinated me, that story. And then so there's different for them. I know these guys really well now, but I see all sorts of funny stories around them. I mean, we saw one yesterday that me and Gaz get the Freemason thing all the time. And it's like it's just, you can't dive into that because you just don't know. There's no, you can't unprove the unprovable. So it's like, whatever, but they get it all the time. So I can't imagine how difficult it must have been for them too, and their sister that they've got an older sister as well that kind of stays out of this as well.
Yeah, I noticed she's not in this much. And I asked that question just because I feel like that sometimes is a deterrent for people to go down this path, even if it's just for self-knowledge. It's not to, espouse it to anyone or, change the world. It's that first question of question everything. And then where do you stop? I mean, we've kind of exhausted. I know we don't need to say any more about it, but it's just, that's why I asked that, because I do feel it's kind of like reminds me of that moment in the Matrix where
Yeah.
he's like, that chair is not real. And he's like, yes, it is, and that's not real. And, you're
think you start,
you're a battery. And,
yeah.
some people, their
Yeah.
heads just, they're not equipped. It's not for the faint of heart.
No.
But yet I'm
And
really hoping that this will catch on more, which is why I created this podcast. Just by talking about things, people can see, oh, there are people out there kind of doing different things and just living this, not just preaching to everybody or trying to convert anyone.
I think what you're yeah, I get. So with the battery thing, and then I looked into that, and then I realized, I found out it's part of Gnosticism, and I didn't even realize that when for a long time. And then I'm like, oh, okay, that's part of that. And then you're on to the next bit. I suppose the more I do it, I kind of don't. I'm not trying to find the truth, because I know it's elusive. I don't know what the truth means. I don't get even what that term means. I don't even know what that wording means. I can't even compute that in my head. I know that I don't understand it. I don't really know what that is. It's an elusive thing. So I suppose you stop when you're when you want to, when you've had enough, and then you might want to try it again. I can't, I mean, I can't, but there is no, you're chasing the phantom of truth, which these are philosophies. This is philosophy. This is conspiracy theory is philosophy. There are conspirators in the world. It only takes two people to get together and say, we want to have a certain outcome, and not tell the third person and drive them into it to be a conspiracy theory, or conspiracy, not theory. These are theories about people who are conspiring. There's a lot of evidence to show that there are certain bloodlines in this world that have been conspiring to push the world in a certain direction for a very long time. But then you have theories of why they do it, theories of what they believe, theories of how it goes back so far. This is all interesting. This is all philosophies. This is all it's their philosophies as well. So the people that are doing this, these bloodline families that I believe at the moment are behind this, they are working off philosophies that go back thousands of years that were written for them, that they believed in. So these people believe
that knowledge.
They're hoarding that knowledge, but also, is it knowledge? I mean, are they brainwashed to think that they think something that's not true?
Oh,
so there's some of the concepts that they go on, the Kabbalah and these satanic kind of understandings. They believe that they are connected to these bloodlines that go back to Mesopotamia, that go back to the Anunnaki, and they believe that they're these bloodlines. But that's their theory of why they're in charge of the world. Do you know what I mean? So we don't. They might believe that, but they might be indoctrinated to believe that in a cult. So it doesn't mean that because they believe it, we have to believe that they are part of that. As long as they believe they are and they've got enough money to make stuff happen, that's all that really matters again. So you're never going to grasp it because you can't get in their head. All you can see is where it's going, which we know where it's going with the Agenda 21. We know what the plan is for the technocracy and to what's happening in China, and they want it over in the West, and that's quite clearly where the plan's going. But then there's all the occult reasons for doing that. That's not the end of it. From my research, that's just the outward expression of really what an occult believes, which is kind of usurping God. It's trying to play God. But then that ties into Gnosticism, and that ties into Neoplatonism, and that ties into Plato. And then what were they thinking at the time? Were they trying to pull one over on people, or they just believed these things and that was their way of understanding the world? So do you know what I mean? You have to play with it because you don't know their intent. And I think we all, when we hear conspiracy, we imply evil, we imply devilish, bad outcomes. But actually, these people just might believe that that's the best way to control the world, that the world needs to be run. And but it isn't. It clearly isn't. We agree that it isn't.
I don't know about that, only because they're not doing it themselves. That's
a good point. Yeah,
that's where I feel they know exactly what they're doing. And obviously, morality is subjective and all that stuff, but they know they have no intentions of living the life they have designed for what, if they get what they want to come.
Absolutely. But they might believe that it's order out of chaos. So they need to create the chaos. See, one of the theories is they need to create the chaos. So the Antichrist comes back and they can save the world, and then we'll go up and do all of that stuff. So they create a necessary evil. So they will convince themselves that they're doing the wrong thing.
I see.
Do you know what I mean? So you don't know what they've convinced themselves. It's a cult that goes back thousands of years. They're going to grow up brainwashed.
Well, you have to also think, I I think a lot of people think they see us as equals or as human beings.
I
And
agree.
from what
Yeah,
I
I agree.
understand, they don't. They don't see us as, feeling, there's no empathy there. So it's like, well, who cares? We'll just do this, we'll do that, we'll monitor them, we'll enslave them in a way that they won't feel like they're enslaved. So it's also their perception of the general public that I feel could desensitize that. I mean, well, obviously, if you're a psychopath, you don't have any level of empathy, but it also helps if you're just looking at people like cattle, then you're not really, there's not a lot of consequence there in your opinion. If you're them, who cares? They do anything we tell them to do anyway.
I agree, but that's not me saying giving them a pass or saying I agree with what they're doing.
Not
We're
at
just trying to
all,
understand the psychology of what
Yeah.
these people are, because at the end of the day, they're people. Their nappies were changed as babies. They were people. They had to be
Exactly.
fed a bottle at some point. This stuff was stuck in their heads, and so we kind of like, we can make sure. I think there's a danger of trying to make them seem like they're superhuman or these evil geniuses, where they're not. And I think we're seeing a lot of that coming out now, because a lot of it is a bit of a mess. And I don't think it's order out of chaos mess. I just think it's a mess because they're not as organized and not as good at this as they think they are. They might understand the human, how we behave, but they don't have the necessary understanding of how the human heart or emotions really function. So they're kind of playing with a corrupt mindset. So it confuses them. So I don't want people to think that they're these evil super geniuses when they're not. They're people's children. Hitler was a baby once.
Yeah.
He turned into a psychopath through a belief system that he was put in, and they was fostered. I mean, there's a lot of people around him fostering and stoking that fire for him to become the beast that he eventually did become. But he still was human. So I think that when we do conspiracy research, there's a kind of like feeling of looking into it, thinking these people are superhuman, and they're not. They're just people, and I think that needs to be remembered.
They're like us, Richard. That's the thing that's frustrating. And I know other conspiracy researchers have talked about this. Like, oh, they wouldn't do that. Yes, they would, because if you think they're thinking of us as equals, and they care so much about us, you're in the wrong mindset. It's unfortunate, you don't want that to be the case, but that's kind of why I brought that up, because it's like, if you don't know who you're dealing with, then you can't deal with them, because you're putting them on your your level of thinking, which is a huge mistake, because then you'll never understand. You'll always be bewildered. You'll be confused. And you want, like, what's going on? Why are they doing this? Why are they doing that? It doesn't make sense. Why are they mandating these jobs for children and things? And that's where I feel it's so important that people understand who and what they're dealing with. And that's where, conspiracy research is a huge part of.
Yeah, I agree. That if you can't think that they think like us, they don't. And they also don't seem to think of us as if we're like them. Yes. So they see a complete divide between their bloodline race and us. And as you say, it's like 1984 or Animal Farm, we're the kind of the cattle to them, but they might believe in their twisted logic that it's a necessary evil. That's just something that needs to be put out there, just to say, look, these people are mental, they're twisted, they're psychopaths. You're not going to let them get away with it. You're not saying just get them on with it because they think they're doing the right thing. I'm saying that they need to be stopped. Obviously, they're clearly psychopathic, but they might not see themselves as psychopathic.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this dynamic of like inaction, action, consequence, because we have so much going on in the world where we're kind of just skating over that. For instance, Biden comes up to the podium and says, inflation, you don't like it? Putin, thank Putin for that. And people actually think this way. Yeah. It's strange that we don't understand that we're the majority, and whatever we choose not to do or what we choose to do has a huge impact on the consequences that unfold. So for instance, like everybody's complaining about in America, the transgender thing. So this woman, woman, Leah, whatever, won this championship. But I sit back and say, save women's sports. If you want to save women's sports, you have to stop participating in these competitions as the woman who's competing against this person. Because
Right. Yeah. Okay.
like
Yeah.
reality comes into play when we play along with it.
Yes.
If
I
we
agree.
refuse not to play along, it can't come to fruition. It can't become a reality. And so I find that a bit frustrating right now, because it's like we're all, we got our fists clenched and we're complaining to ourselves, but we're still active participants in the charade.
Yeah.
But what are your thoughts on that?
No, I think it's a really good point. It's a really good point. If they hadn't have just like, if you come to the start of the race and they just said, "I'm not doing this," you couldn't have had it. So I agree. Yeah, there is a massive part of our own participation in this as well. Absolutely, there is.
But what
But
is that duality? I mean, I'm not saying you know all the answers, but it's just so interesting to see that duality of like, this is horse shit, while you put your cap on and your bathing suit and you jump in the water.
because I think that's kind of easy to do if you've got enough money in the bank, or you're not, you have to do that. You're not contracted to swim that race, or you won't get the money that you need to support your family. I think that's a big part of it, is financial, is that the fact that you have to kind of, sometimes you have to play the game to be able to survive, and we're too far along down in the system, so that kind of in that instant we don't know the circumstances of everybody else lining up for that race, whether they needed to actually do that race, or whether they're contracted to do it, could get in a lot of financial trouble for not doing it, or they're looking around thinking, I don't want to be the first person to step out, everybody else needs to come with me, which is probably more than likely that what we're all doing is that, okay, who's going to be the first person to say this is ridiculous? Then you'll get people follow. And this is what happened with the pushback with the COVID narrative. It took a little while for people across the world to kind of stand up. And that's why I think the freedom rallies were so important. They weren't necessarily going to stop the government from doing these things initially. But what they did is that they definitely, absolutely stemmed the tide of it. And this would still be going on now, far worse, if it wasn't for people across the world, the convoys in Canada, people going, no, we're not doing this. It became too much of a hassle for them to bother doing it. So in the circumstances, so with the race, if everybody to do the race, they would have made such, like everybody else competing in that race would have made such of a nuisance for themselves not doing the race, then that probably wouldn't have gone ahead. So yes, there's a massive level of compliance there too, but it doesn't mean, there's so many nuances. It really depends on each person's individual understanding. Some of them might agree with it, some of them might have actually just gone, this is all right, actually I'm happy with this. So it's hard to know. Again, it's hard to know what they're thinking individually. There's so many different perspectives it could be. So who knows? But I agree, there's definitely a massive part of us, not me and you specifically, obviously we have a different look at the world because we look into this stuff, but compliance is a massive, this is the only way any of this stuff happens, is compliance.
It's just harder to get out of it the further you go into it. If you just draw the line in the sand before it can happen, it won't happen. So
you have to know it's happening.
Well, I mean,
yeah.
In the
So
swimming situation,
okay.
it's like,
yeah. It's the same
I
situation as what you're
support those
saying
women.
with stuff.
I'm not looking down on them, but I just say to myself, draw the line. Like if you all pull out, there is no competition. You can't even have it, and that's, where, I don't know. I know you've talked to a few people, maybe this whole narcissism thing. I feel like we've all become victims of the narcissists that run our world. We have this codependency on them, and we can see it's wrong, but we're like, we feel like, well, what could we do? We can't do anything. We'll just go along with it and cross our fingers and hope I win, even though it's physically impossible for me to win against this guy.
But what you said there was right, is that we're dependent. So in terms of narcissism, the less dependent you are on the narcissist, the more chance you can step away. So what's happening is, that's why they've got everybody as consumer-based society, is everybody have got stuff we don't need, houses we don't need, spare rooms that we don't really need. And that's what happened, is that we became so weighed down with stuff that we have to comply to keep, not only keep that stuff, but keep up the fact that we're in so much debt to keep the stuff that we never needed in the first place. That was always allowed. That was like that was on purpose during the 80s, the overindulgence. We've got so much stuff we don't need. And you look around your house, you're like, I have no idea where any of this stuff came from. And it's stuff, but it's stuff that you've kind of built our own prisons in that sense. So the only way to kind of get out of being reliant on a narcissistic system is to not want the things that narcissistic system is offering you, or trying to limit and mitigate what you'll take and what you need from it. So live as simple life as you possibly can. And that comes to the question is, do you want that life? Is that a better life than what they're offering from the going into the social credit system, into the metaverse? It's a question of people's what they want. Do they want to have to live on something where they're kind of completely reliant and on their own skills, and they don't have a lot, but they have their freedom? Or do you want to have comfort but no freedom? And I think that's the question. That's the fork in the road for people. Is that, what do you want? Do you want comfort, therefore you won't have freedom? Or do you want to have a hard physical life, or harder daily life, but you'll have your freedom? That's just a moral, that's not even a moral, that's just a conundrum that we're all going to kind of think we're going to have to face over the next 10 years of what you'll choose. And I'm not saying either one are right and wrong. It's individual. It's not for me to say.
And also, I feel like the approval factor, like we want to please the authoritarians because we were we were schooled to do that. We were educated to do that. So I think that's another component. It is like what you're talking about to me is, yeah, exactly. It's a modern day serfdom.
It's also the social media element of it as well. So people don't think things exist unless they stick it on social media. So
yes,
you know what I mean? Goodness. So if you had to disappear off social media completely, like, because when we started this, you said to me, like, it's hard to find things on you. That's because I've been banned from social media. But I think people have put so much. I talk about this about about transhumanism, and I think it has various elements, not just the technical microchip element, which is certainly part of it. But part of it is creating your avatar online. Are you willing to kill your online avatar off forever and live offline? Would people? Because it's a people now is a death. Are you willing to never go online again? Like in the sense of social media. You might go on a website and buy stuff. You might go on Amazon and buy stuff, but are you not willing to have your online avatar presence ever online again, to keep your freedoms out in the real world when you step off and you log off his computer? Are we willing to do that? That's a question that I don't even know if I could do it. So, but it is something that we have to understand, is that we've created these online transhumans of ourselves, these super versions of ourselves. Are we willing to delete those to be able to get your freedoms back? And I think that scares the shit out of a lot of people. I think people will be listening to this thinking, I know I should, but that's scary. Do I disappear? Do I cease to exist if I'm not, there's no online version of me?
Well, I don't know. I think everybody, it's what's your why? Because to me, I left social media 2 years ago. I only came back just to Instagram for the podcast. That was it. And I keep it that way. I have no friends, no nothing on like that I connect with there. For me, it was like, I didn't want to be, because nothing is free. See, people look at these services, and I've worked in tech for a while, and they're harvesting your data. So that went too far with my ethical line. And then also very pertinent, like the documentary you directed, all the triggers, all the provocation for arguments, for hateful things, for trolling. I started to realize I was becoming that, and I couldn't handle it. I wasn't just pointing a finger at people doing it. It was also me. I was getting emotionally stirred up and very caustic, and, sometimes it ruined my day. So I don't know. I feel like it might be easier if you understand the mechanisms of it, but they don't want you to. They don't. If it was I would pay for a social media service before I would opt into a free one, because I would have more privacy, more, transparency into what are you doing with my information, and that's the thing people don't understand. Nothing is free. They think
Yeah,
it is, but it's not. You are the product.
absolutely. But also we've got to think that people of we're a similar age, people of our age grew up without this. Imagine if you're a child, you're a kid, and you're growing up. So basically you're born and your mum and dad put pictures of you online. So as soon as you're born, your online avatar is born. So you're not growing up in a world where it once didn't exist. We remember 20 odd years ago when none of this existed. So it's all a bit of novelty to us still, psychologically. Somewhere deep down, we find this quite funny. So we can disconnect from it because we were once never connected. If you're born, as the film was about, born plugged in,
Yeah.
how can you unplug? And this is where the transhumanism idea for me comes in, is that you're building an online human plus. Your online transhuman is your online avatar. And that's where the narcissism comes in. Narcissist, you're always watching your online persona, like Narcissus did when he got transfixed in the water with his reflection. You're always watching your reflection, always online. So you're more invested as a kid in your reflection than you are in your real being. How do you kill off your reflection when your reflection is the only way of seeing yourself? And we have the same kind of analogy with vampires. Vampires are only they live forever, but they're never alive because they can't see themselves. Imagine spending your whole life where you can't see yourself. You know you exist, but you can never see yourself. How terrifying is that, to know that everyone else in the world could see you, but you could never see yourself?
Well, that's like being blind almost. I mean,
kind of, yeah, like pseudo blind. So
but
I mean,
feel like you cultivate more of a person if that's the case. When we get too caught up in the physicality, that's where it gets dangerous. And a lot of these experts and gurus and online celebrities, I'll click into their profile, and it's just especially women, it's cleavage, it's selfies, and that's it. And I'm like,
yeah,
how is she getting 10,000? And I'm not envying, hey, I'll pat anybody on the back, but I'm like, what provokes 10,000 likes for somebody just basically objectifying themselves in every single post? But that's really, and that was discussed in the documentary, where kids were saying, I could post something that has some substance to it, espouses some sense of, knowledge of something, and I'll get 2 likes. But if I put a selfie on, I'll get 100 or 200 likes. So you're going to go, we're like the rat with the, picking at the switch for the pellet. If we get more pellets, if we switch on this side, we're going to do that. So it is kind of like, and it's, I know this is an original idea, but we're getting conditioned to say, okay, more people like this. They like when I'm in a bikini and, or, I'm all dressed up, or I have bunny ears, more so than they like when I'm no makeup and, love yourself. And it doesn't matter, that's how it works. So
it's an interesting, it's an interesting thought process to think what it would be like if you deleted your online avatar and that went, and whether you could exist or not. I think it's a well worth looking at as well. It's not also, now we've moved into from that to virtue sickness. I call it virtue sickness.
Oh, I
because
love that.
look at it now. You're suddenly if you're not pro-vaccine, you're awful, and now if you're not pro-Ukraine, you're awful. This is a virtue sickness. So it's not only look at my online avatars, look how virtuous I am. And it's when I think someone said it the other day, I can't remember the guy's name, and I stole it from him and I can't remember his name, it's terrible, but it's when the we masquerades as the me. Sorry, it's when the me, is it the other way around? When the me masquerades as the we. So you're saying we are all together, but you're actually just saying, look how good I am. And it's basically that. It's not you again, it's look how nice I am, look how great I am, look how, and we're all not. We're all fucking assholes sometimes, but we all know that. So you're building this online avatar again, and it's all very well for us, but when I keep worrying about the kids, because they're going to grow up to see that as normal. And my transhumanist idea is that it's a psychological transhumanism, that kids aren't going to know how to love or care or really laugh, but they're going to perform these things. They're going to perform love. They're going to perform laughing. When someone laughs, it doesn't really reach their eyes. They're going to perform being human, because they're not going to know how to be a human. Because how do we learn how to really feel? We learn it from our parents. But if your parents are now kids, they're not going to be passing that down. And I feel like it's being kind of deleted out of human DNA, to be able to actually feel. And that's what I think transhumanism is. It's like a soft transhumanism. It isn't to do with computers, and that's part of it, and chips in the brain, that's part of it. But really, it's down to the fact that, are you human if you can't have genuine human emotions? You can't be. And then what does that sound like to you? That sounds like these bloodlines, psychopaths.
Exactly. We're in the
And
reflection of them.
they're creating mini versions of themselves. And this is where the whole conspiracy world really gets like interesting to me, because it's like the psychology of it and the philosophy of it and the occultism of it. It's just weird. They're trying to be mini gods and create mini versions of themselves, which are psychopathic. And I think everybody's looking out there and looking at the technology and looking at all of these big, bright, shiny things, and we're going to look like believe in the Matrix and the Meta. And actually, what's happening is it's happening on a psychological and psychological and emotional level. And these kids are becoming, not all of them, and I think actually it's not really grasped hold as well as they thought it was, but certainly it's having an effect on these poor children. And we said at the start, well, we worry about the kids of tomorrow. I worry about not just the situation they're going to live in, but how they're going to actually emotionally process real feelings. I don't think they're going to know what that means, and that worries me more than anything.
No, I 100% agree. And back to, I really love that documentary, Plugged In. There was a part where Richard says, we're beings who crave community and purpose, but we've destroyed our own community. We've destroyed all sense of purpose. We're rudderless, we're objectiveless. We have no destination to sail to. And as a consequence, we turn on each other and ourselves. It's very painful. It's a strange and dislocated time in which people find themselves completely isolated, even when they're surrounded by others, as we cannot offer the time, attention, and conscious awareness to each other because we're giving it to the great big shiny God that we carry in our pockets and bow to. And that's the looking down every day. And to me, what you just described about not being able to love and all that is the symptom. But that to me is the root cause, because we don't have communities anymore. Everything's virtual. We don't have a true purpose. Our purpose is to get a good job, earn some money, rack up some debt, hopefully pay it off, and then die.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where our purpose is. And I feel that's another way that we become very vulnerable to these narratives, because they create in our minds some sense of meaning in our lives. Like for me, when the lockdowns occurred, it felt like I was in prison. I didn't feel virtuous. I felt like, well, I have a life. Like my life means something. I want to get out there, even if it's just to be with other people. And that was considered a selfish thing. Like, well, no, we're all in this together. All these taglines and all these very deceptive, kind of, for the greater good, and we're going to build back better, we're going to beat this, we're going to sacrifice for the greater good. And because we don't have these communities, we don't have this sense of purpose for ourselves and for our families, we fall prey. A lot of people, not maybe us, but a lot of people fall prey to these kinds of this trickery, this psychology, because this manipulation, because it makes them like the Karens that they talk about, or the social justice warriors, because we are inherently wired to want to have a sense of purpose. We're inherently wired to have a sense of community, but we just don't know how to create that in real life anymore.
Yeah, I think well, Richard, I mean, that was a great, Richard was fantastic in that film.
Sorry, I had to bring that in.
No,
it's
great.
It was so relevant to
it's really relevant, because what he was talking about was,
he's amazing, but yeah.
He is, he's a very, very, he's a good guy as well. He was talking about the symptoms, as you said, like the cause we were talking about. Sorry, we were talking about the effect of it, and he was talking about the actual cause of it was that. with the phones, with social media in that instant. But what we didn't cover, and then you can't cover everything in the film, was the reason why it's happening. Beyond the social media, why is this being done? And that's where you get into the conspiracy. That's where you get into the understanding the psychology, and you get into the philosophy of things like transhumanism and where it goes back to, and the understanding of how they've kind of used bits of Gnosticism and Neoplatonism, and even Darwin cropped the end off of Neoplatonism and used it as monkey to man kind of situation, when actually you got rid of the spiritual element of it. So that's been done on purpose. So really, why has it been on purpose? Well, the reason is because these people want to be gods. They believe God is dead. They believe God is dead, and they want to be the gods. Whatever you think of God, or God is and God is not. There is certainly, for me, the only other thing I suppose that I kind of know is that when I step out my front door, I couldn't have done what I see in front of me. I couldn't have made this happen. There's certainly an intelligence going on here that's not. I might be part of it. I believe that I'm possibly a spark of it. I have that little bit in me that allows me to create things on a smaller level, like a holographic level, like a meta and was it meta and I can't remember what the other one is. The bigger and the smaller version of it.
Micro macro?
Micro macro, that's what I'm looking for, micro macro. But I'm certainly, when I walk out and I look at the world and I see the trees and I see the birds and I see everything that's natural, I couldn't have done that. So certainly there's something else going on here, and to me that's God, not a person in the sky. It's an intelligence here that's a design that I have no idea how it happened, and it's wonderful. But the only thing that with Gnosticism, they look at it as I don't kind of subscribe to the Gnostic understanding of the Yaldabaoth and created this fractured earth. It's a bad copy of the real earth. I don't kind of buy into that. I don't think it's a very healthy way of looking at the world, that we need to acquire knowledge to escape here. It always feels like the self-development world is you're not good enough. Like you need to do better. You need to be the best version of yourself. And it's like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm all right. Like they always make you feel like you need to be somewhere else. And Gnosticism has that element. Although the only thing we really know about Gnosticism is what the Christian church, the Orthodox Christians, told us about them, other than the Nag Hammadi text. And so we're not quite sure whether they actually believe these things or not. And it's such a wide version, Gnosticism, that we're just focusing in on that one thing. But being trapped here, the whole Matrix thing, I find that kind of like sad, really, that actually if you look out there and look at your children running around the park and the kids playing, if this is a shit version of what the world is supposed to be like, it ain't that bad. Yeah. It isn't that bad. And so I don't kind of buy into that. But these things get used, and these bloodlines, they're steeped in this knowledge all their life, and they believe that this world is a certain way, and they want to be the gods. God is dead to them, and they want to be the gods. And that's why this technology, getting back to that, the point is this technology is just a mechanism to get the job done that they want to, which is to create their own version. They want to be the Yaldabaoths, the creators of their own world that we're trapped in. So they want to have a sub reality, because they believe that we're in some sort of matrix world, which I don't buy into. So they want to play God. It's as simple as that. They just want to be gods. They want to be like the gods. They believe they have the bloodline, that their bloodline related to the Aeons or the gods or the Anunnaki or whatever they want to call themselves. And this is what the psychology of them. So if we need to find the reason, that's why this research is so important. It's not that I believe in any of this stuff. I want to understand why they think this way and what they think. Then you can understand why this technology is being used and why this outcome is happening and where it's going to. Because without understanding the way they think and why they think the way they think, we are kind of just lost as to, and then you spoke about earlier about that lady next door that you spoke to or down the road. She wouldn't have a clue because she doesn't understand that these people think this way. But why would they do that? Because they think this way, because they've been told, they're brought up with this understanding of the world that we don't have in our education system, which was started by the Rockefellers in the early 1900s. We don't have this understanding. You have to go out and find it yourself. So the point of doing all this research is you say, where do you stop? Wherever you want, but I would stop when I kind of satisfied that I understand the mentality of these people, because they have very, very odd views, but they think they're gods. They believe they're gods, and they want to behave as
laughable
such.
to me.
Of course, it's mad, and they're mad, but they're very rich, mad people, and rich, mad people are very dangerous. And they don't, as you say, give a shit what happens to us, because to us, we're just collateral damage to them. Sorry.
And that's the thing. It's like they're with us, but are they of us? Because if you think about it, they're all in positions of power, but you also have to crave that kind of power. And so many, I used to think, well, we need to get more like them. I used to think that way, because then we can be in a position of power and change the dynamic. But it's funny, more and more when I think about it, I think they are with us, but not of us. I don't know exactly what that means. I don't have a concrete idea of that, and that's fine. But because so few people in the general public have any craving or desire to obtain power at the level they do. It's like, we just want to live our lives. We just want to love our families. We just want to have enough to enjoy ourselves, maybe travel, and discover things and, just have a normal life. But it's so extreme, their desire for, and I guess you could attribute that to the reptilian brain, but it's so far off the charts, and I used to think of it, well, we're just not ambitious enough. We're lazy. We're just sitting back, letting them call the shots because we don't want to step up. But then I think about it, and it's like, usually the best leaders are the ones who don't want to be leaders, right? I mean, they're kind of reluctant to be that because they understand the trappings of what that means to then get into a position of power and start dictating the other people what they need to do. It's a very slippery slope. And that's where I just feel like they're not the same. Like, yes, moral, everything else, but also you can just see it playing out in the world. They're so similar. There's such a very consistent profile of people in power, yet none of us can really relate to it, which is another reason why I feel we can't understand them. And that's just repetitively going back to, well, they wouldn't do that because we wouldn't do that, because we can't understand wanting so much that you're insatiable. It's just never enough. Like you'd think someone like Zuckerberg, if I had the money he had, I'd be traveling, spending time with my family. And yet these people want to know when we go to the toilet, when we flush the toilet, when, every single human being on the planet, they want to know exactly what we're doing. When I'm like, well, I'm just go have fun with that, because you're not really going to be that entertained. I live a pretty pedestrian existence. But why? You have all these things, but yet you're still turning outward towards us. It's not enough. No, I want you destitute. I want Hunger Games. I want you crawling on your knees, looking up to me. I'm your God. And so that's where I feel like when people say, oh, no, they're like us, they're just psychopaths, or they're just this or that. It's like, no, there's something more there, because none of us have that drive. We just don't. It's like almost an innate thing that humans don't really aspire to that level of control and power and wealth.
No, it's a good. No, and I get it. There's a book called, I think I've got it behind me, I can't grab it, but it's Watiko. It's by Paul Levy.
Yes.
And the Watiko kind of like situation. I mean, David sees it in one way, but Paul Levy writes about Watiko quite a lot. I've got his latest book, actually. I've interviewed him once. That kind of like shows he's very, very good but that's another concept of why they are like they are. It's a mind virus. In his concept, again, I'm not saying I subscribe to this, but these are very interesting concepts and very interesting ways of trying to answer the question, as you said there. So Paul Levy's Watiko is a mind virus, and it's something that infuses into people and it takes over them. But you said a very interesting sort of word there. You said that like there's never enough for them, because they're empty. They're empty vessels. It's like a hole in my bucket. That whole song. Hole in my bucket, Delilah. I feel like you tipping water out. There's a hole in these people. That they're empty vessels, and nothing will ever be enough for them. And that's the point, as they're trying to find sustenance. And some of them will be born into that, but a lot this comes from abuse. You hear the MK Ultra, Project Monarch, fracturing of the mind. There's concepts there that go back to Gnosticism as well, and Sophia and all of this if we look into it. But that makes them empty vessels, and there's a lot of people that think that it was actually like split personalities. But there's another concept there that they actually were breaking these children down, which you'll find in these bloodlines, a lot of satanic ritual abuse.
Yes.
That will allow other entities to come into that person and use that person as a vessel to get done what here. And that's where watiko comes in. That's where the archon concept come in. Again, these are concepts. I'm not saying I believe in these, but these are ways of people were trying to understand why people do evil things. So they were using these rituals, satanically abusing these children, so to fracture the mind, they disassociate themselves from who they are. But in the mind of these Satanists, that would allow an entity to come in and use that body, that vessel here on the planet to do these deeds. And that's where watiko comes in, the mind virus comes in. It's where we see the Exorcist film comes from. These sort of things. Rosemary's Baby is the Antichrist version of it, which is Polanski and all sorts of weird shit going on there with Charles Manson, and John Lennon was shot on the doorstep of where they shot some of that film as well. And there's a lot of occultism going on there, and obviously you had the Crowley connection. So Aleister Crowley was Anton LaVey, and all of it, Levy, were all part of this. These things are the way these people think, but it could be that these people, unfortunately, are so broken that there is something else coming through them. I can't say, I don't know, but these are concepts. These people, as you say, do behave in a way that we never would. But if you're sexually and emotionally and ritually abused all your life, at the very least, you're going to be very, very pissed off and angry and not care about anybody and want to take it out on the world. But there
But
could be
also
another
those
element
abusers, that's coming from another place too. I mean, it's, it goes up and up the chain that these rituals have been established, but it's like, I don't know, I just can't, I mean, maybe that's just me being, a bleeding optimist, but I just don't see humans, adopting these rituals and these kinds of ways of just literally like these parasitic rituals.
But that comes back to what I was saying earlier, then this transhumanist idea that I have, that what makes you human. It's not your biology. You know what I mean? Does your body make you human, or does your emotional capacity,
like your soul?
Yeah, your emotional capacity, your understanding, your ability to feel real or genuine feelings, is that what makes you human? Because if that's what makes you human, if you delete all those things, are you human anymore? You might be biologically human, but are you not biologically human? Sorry, are you only biologically human, but you're not emotionally or spiritually or psychologically human if those elements are deleted from you? It's just a concept. I'm not saying it's true. It's just the transhumanism, to me, could well be the deletion of everything that makes you human other than your biology. And even that's getting messed with these vaccines, I would assume, it appears. So that is an understanding. If these children are ritually abused, are they deleting everything out of them, or at least shutting it off, and they have to be brought back through, that everything that makes them human is pushed to the side and allowing something else through. And therapy and love and care for these kids are the only thing that brings a human out of them. Like, it is really, really hard to know. Are some of them too far gone? Or is there an element, a spark of human still in there that you can still get to, even at the worst type of person? I don't know the answer to that, but I would assume that the spark's still there somewhere.
Well, couldn't you apply that methodology to communities? I mean, to the human population now, because obviously I've only lived in my lifetime, so I can't speak to all that happened before then, but I just feel like we are constantly being traumatized. In these past 2 years, the trauma level has just skyrocketed from day to day. And I do feel people are starting to do that. When you start trying to talk to them about uncomfortable things that need to change, trying to get them back to feeling something, some level of human emotion, it's like they don't. It's easier for them that, they'll be like, oh, I don't want to talk about that. We're eating, we're having a good time. I don't want to talk about that. And to me, that's a sign of trauma, because it's just constant now. It's war. It's, pandemic. It's, maybe you and I aren't suffering from this, but I'm sure there's people now who are suffering from a level of poverty that they never could have imagined because of all that's happened with the ripple effects of the COVID restrictions and policies, all the people who lost their businesses, all the people, you know what I mean? So it's really hard to, like, how do we get back? And then compound that with what I mentioned with that quote about community and purpose. We don't even have that to fall back on anymore. We
Yeah.
really don't. It's been so fractured. Could we have it again? Absolutely. I'm not trying to say that it's lost forever, but as it stands right now, we don't have that. And they have a very clear understanding of that. A lot of these social justice organizations, BLM, all of them, what is their goals? To break up the family, to, now your family's the state, your family's this it's a very cultish kind of mentality, ideology. And so when we don't have the tools we need, we do, I think, kind of just compartmentalize and separate from the pain of everything that's happened, all the trauma. Sometimes I would just didn't cry, just thinking about, what other people must be going through as they kept clamping down and clamping down and clamping down on all the freedoms. And you see people get a little uncomfortable, like, well, it's okay, it'll go back to normal, and we just got to get through this, and just put your mask on, and social distance, and eventually we'll get out of this. And our lack of agency is just eroding rapidly. It's just, or, what could we do? It's going to happen anyway. And this, like, especially with just transhumanism, the metaverse, the whole switch to carbon economies, like, well, it's going to happen. I guess we could just try to navigate it into the best possible outcome, but it's going to happen. But, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't have to happen. If we don't want it to happen, if we can look at it in a way where we can understand the real repercussions of where this is going, we wouldn't want it to happen, right? We can't just say, well, we're on the ride, we're strapped in, there's not a whole lot we could do. You just need to put your hands up, smile for the picture when you get the drop, and that's it. And so, it seems like there's this mass trauma happening in the world where people are just separating, they're compartmentalizing their feelings, they're compartmentalizing their perception of reality, they're compartmentalizing their ethical compass of, like, just let it go, all right, whatever, drag time, story time, or just so many things that are happening in the world right now, where we seem to be a very amoral society because it's just easier to be that way.
Yeah, and people are plugged in as well to the media, but you're completely right. I just want to kind of caveat what I said earlier about these people being like a spark of their humanity left in there. It doesn't negate the fact that these psychopaths like Fauci and Bill Gates need to be locked up and kept away from us. I'm not excusing them for being they need to be locked up. They're mental. They are clearly mentally ill. But my point was that there's probably a spark in there that's still human. But you're right. There'll be the big thing for us we need to start with is unplugging people from the mainstream media. They have to unplug from the mainstream media. If they won't, we'll turn the telly off and go and get rid of that fix, then we have no chance. It's the same thing the Levites did back in the Middle East, in I suppose it's Jerusalem. I'm never my geography is not great, but the Levites were the only ones that were able to kind of read the Gospels, and they used to preach the Gospels to the masses, and they would basically just change it, and because obviously people couldn't read. So now people can't read. They can't read anything because they only know the language of the mainstream media. So unless they go over to the alternate media and start researching this stuff you will never get, that you wouldn't even know of in school. I'd never even heard of any of this stuff. Of course I hadn't. You need to learn a new language. You need to learn a new way of reading. You need to learn, you need to re-engineer your brain to kind of understand that this stuff is not out there like the different universe. It's the fact that this information was kept from you. But not only do you not know that existed, you don't know how to understand it, because the map of the world is completely that way. So not only are you I'm reading the Gnostic, the Nag Hammadi text at the moment, and I'm having to kind of read the same line 10 times and I know I'm going to forget it, because I don't have the brain functionality that I would have had if I was brought up in these secret societies and understood that's the way we read stuff. But because we don't have that, and with the mainstream media, they get sent this stuff, but then nothing coming back. They don't have to participate in any thinking. They just get the information. With the stuff that we look into, the people that do research into the alternative media, conspiracies, philosophy, way beyond my knowledge of psychology, of philosophy, of religions, way beyond my knowledge. They've retrained their brain to understand the world in a different way, and they think in a different language. So we need to unplug people from the mainstream media so they're able to have the space to understand a new way of reading, writing, thinking, the thought in their brain, the way they function, the terminology of things. They need to start looking at what certain words mean, why they're used in that context. The whole thing, you kind of need to have a great reset of your own brain, because the problem is that we've been given faulty systems, and it's a lifetime's work to re-engineer that. And the earlier you start, the better. The later you start, the harder it's going to do to unpick it. And most people are just trapped in it. And not only are they trapped in it, they're addicted to it because it's easy. I know people that know the mainstream media and they're in their 70s, know they're being lied to, but they'll still sit there for 7 or 8 hours a day and watch it. And I'm like, you're being lied to, you're being gaslit, that this is nonsense, and you're still watching it. And I can't get you away from it. So you must be addicted to it. You must be addicted to it. And these are people that read other stuff like UFO stuff and the lighter side of it. And they know that they're being lied to, but they are so addicted to it because it's kind of their God of tell me what to think. And they won't even, it's not that they're outwardly thinking that, but that's their food for thought, literally their food for thought. So they're going to need to re-engineer the way they think. And that means getting rid of everything. So imagine you believed in, like in a cult, you believed in this Messiah for 45 years and you were following him around and you were going, and in your heart, all the time you were going, seems like a bit of an arsehole at me, keeps doing weird shit. I don't really like him. But for 40 years, you went and did loads of stuff and you behaved in a certain way that you wouldn't have behaved in if you hadn't been following this guy around, and you had the courage at 21 to go, I'm leaving. You have to leave the cult of the mainstream media. You have to leave it. And to do that, you have to look at everything you think you know and be willing to chuck it out the window and start again, and look at all your behavior and kind of go, okay, I need to make amends maybe to certain people, or at least try and change the way I go forward. It's a massive commitment to go, I don't believe that anymore. And even in the conspiracy world, you have to do the same thing. And I said that at the start, you have to drop things if they no longer serve you and go, like, I'm not that information. That's not what I believe anymore. I believed it for 10 years and now I don't believe it anymore. You have to have the courage to go, I'm not the information. I'm just trying to understand it, and there'll be processes and different stages and you might go back and forth. But you have to have the courage to go, I don't believe that anymore, or I need to cut from that. And people are stuck in the mainstream media, at the cult of the mainstream media. If it wasn't for them, and that's why I never went in, because I saw for what it was. I couldn't articulate it. I saw what it was. I saw the substance of the people working there, who were good people, but they were fake. They were so like beyond characters. It was cartoon-like. So I was like, I don't want to be part of this because I'll be miserable. I'll be depressed if we drink themselves stupid, like most of them do, because they hate themselves really, because they know they're not in something they thought they were going to be in. So they have to be able to let that go. And I just don't think until that happens, how can you even start with someone if they're not willing to go, I've got a problem here. I'm addicted to the mainstream media. I'm addicted to this narrative because it serves me. It serves me. I don't have to do anything this way.
And you're a part of something.
I'm part of something. I'm a victim here as
well. It
well.
goes back to the community and purpose. Well, I have a sense of purpose. I get up every day and I give people the news and I give them the version of the truth, and then I get promotions for it. I get paid well for it. I get accolades for it. And, we're still in that reptilian brain where, cavemen, if you were shunned from the group, it was life or death. And I still feel like we have that fear trigger of being shunned from what we've always known. And that group, most people, not every person, it's more, it's the pain pleasure thing, right? Like you said, you drink yourself, you probably wind up not being around for much longer if you kept in that trajectory. Well, for them, it's the opposite. It's
Yeah.
like, I'm miserable, but I'm more miserable when I'm not part of this, when I'm not somebody, I'm not, this presenter, I don't have the prestige, so everybody's pain is linked up in a different way. So their pain errs more to the side of that primitive fear of not fitting in, not, being ridiculed, because we all know what happens when you step outside. David says the postage stamp.
Yeah, you will all be ridiculed, as you've seen.
It's not a pretty journey, and even I tell people, oh, you're laughing at these people now who are speaking out and stuff, but understand that when Malcolm X, Martin Luther King Jr., when he first started this, did you think everyone was like, oh, wow, you're amazing, we want to hear more? Absolutely not. They did not. They were staunchly against any level of equality. They threw things at him. They abused him. They, ridiculed him. They did everything they could to silence him. And I'm not putting anyone on pedestals, but I'm just saying these are like people that are revered in American society. Yeah. We only see the end result. We don't see the whole journey that brought them to now be, these icons of freedom and get constantly being quoted and, that kind of holding that example of what it means to be a true like civil rights person or whatever. That wasn't the beginning. The beginning was all like, and I guess you could say the same thing for David, tons of ridicule. Now he's like, my problem is I can't keep up with the requests to engage with me. Whereas before I couldn't fill a phone booth. Yeah. So, that
he still gets ridiculed everywhere though. He still gets it and he'll always get it. But he's kind of, that does harden you. He said it's the best thing ever happened. I mean, obviously, even if you don't believe Jesus was a real person, and I don't know, I wasn't there, but the concept is the same there. He was ridiculed. He was bloody killed, apparently, according to the narrative. He was hung in very
alone.
Alone.
That was pretty much
he was apparently hung, and he was put on the cross, and he was in front of a crowd. I mean, for being a heretic, we're all heretics if you don't go along with the norm. So we're all heretics because we don't go along with what the mainstream media said, which again, it comes back to them being the Levites, the mouthpiece of the establishment, which might be the church or the government or the bloodlines. Now we're all anti-vaxxers if you don't want to take a experimental gene therapy, which isn't even a vaccine. And even if you've had loads before, you won't want to wear your mask, or they convolute everything. So why would you want to go over there and do that? Well, because it's the right fucking thing to do. It's as simple as that. And I don't care what you think. But if you're eroding people's ability to stand up for themselves, or even have any sovereign, like, can you sit in the room on your own and everybody else hate you and just go, I know who I am. I know I'm all right. I'm doing the best I can. They're trying to erode people's ability to do that, and it's all right for us who are a bit older, but these poor kids who haven't even got the groundwork, the cornerstones of their personality haven't even been laid yet. So they're straight away, their avatars online, and that's who they are. We didn't have that. We had the ability to spend 20 years possibly of building the foundations of who we are, and still we get pounded, and takes us a long time to go piss off. I don't care what you think. These poor kids don't even have a foundation of that. And that's what I think we need to be really, really careful, really look out for these kids to go, okay, it's not only that it doesn't matter what other people think, is all like, you need to figure out what you think first. And if you want to go that way with them, then that's fine. But you need to have the time to be able to figure out what you think and have the options. And then by cutting off all this information we look through, imagine a world where you went to school and you had people like David Icke's books there, you had Dean Henderson's books there, you had Paul Levy's books there, you had a lot of these other works that people that aren't as controversial, stuff about man's search for meaning. I mean, and that's like Viktor Frankl. I mean, if you had his books there, you had things about like the nature of reality there, like the fact that we might be human holograms. We had a vast array of understanding, and we could go, okay, there's my version of the world. By the time I'm 15, 16, I kind of got all of this smorgasbord of just madness, and I'm going to try and figure it out. We don't have that. We have this little thing here, and then you spend your rest of your life going, I really feel horrible. I was put in a straitjacket by the time I was 5 years old, and I don't know why I feel terrible, but I know I do. And not only you're in a straitjacket, you're strapped to a chair looking at someone telling you all day long that you're a bad person because you're killing the planet because of climate change, which was called global warming 20 years ago until it stopped warming. You're a bad person because you're affecting the earth, and this is all part of the plan to Agenda 21. But no one's telling you about Agenda 21. No one's telling you about the Earth Summit. No one's telling you about why this goes back to occult understandings, because all you're thinking is, oh, bloody hell, I need to make sure I put the plastic in the green bin, or I'm going to kill my nan. It's just, it is extreme now. And
That's
no wonder
abuse.
you
It's trauma.
of course it's abuse. And then what happens, like we were saying earlier, they fracture and they don't know how to feel because they're too scared to feel
Because
anything.
it could be wrong. Your feelings are now right or wrong, and you're just condemned for any individual thought or expression. You know, you see people doing all these mental gymnastics when they speak. I find myself doing it sometimes too. I'll have a conversation and I'll look back on it and I'll say, geez, did I sound, you know, anti whatever when I said that? Or did I, you know, like I'm reviewing it in my mind because I'm just in the moment and I'm just expressing myself. And then in the back of my mind, I'm like, God, did I come off as, you know, and it's kind of a symptom of abuse, you know, where nothing about you is right. You're never, you know, you're fat, you're, you know, you're gluttonous, you're this, you're that, because that's what the media just feeds at us 24/7. And I could definitely say as a woman, that's huge, you know, like absolutely. They're always
and religion
telling
did the same. Religion did it, the Christianity, the 10 Commandments. You're like, you look at some of them, you think, the fuck are you talking about? It's madness. And it's like, you still want to put them 10 Commandments on someone 2,000 years later. Like, it's absurd. But they did it then. And then you had the reaction to that was Gnosticism, but that not only is the God of the Old Testament an arsehole, which he clearly is, but he's Yaldabaoth and he created this fake reality. And now we live in this trapped world. And it's like the reaction to that was that. And they go, well, this is bad and this is good. Well, no, because that's a reaction to the abuse of that. And that reaction, that abuse was probably something to that. So it's like, even back then, they were living these absurd rules. Like, it's been going on a very, very long time. The abuse, the psychological abuse of humanity, it's been going on thousands of years. And so what we're seeing now is a product of just thousands of years of psychotic abuse. And now we're on to the kind of technological fourth industrial version of it, but it's the same. It's just another flavor of psychological abuse by people that have been psychologically abused. And it has to stop at some point. It has to stop. It's eating itself alive. And I don't think it's got much longer. But what is left on the other side, people are going to have to be. I don't know people could actually figure out what to do about the internet, without being online, without their avatar anymore. Essentially, I think we're the last generation of ones that could probably reverse it and go back to where we were 20 years ago, and would struggle for a little while. I can't see how kids will do it in the future if they've never known any different. How would you know any different if you were into it?
I can't see it, but if we have those communities in place, if we have something for them to come back to, which we don't, that's, to me, that's another issue. Okay, I put the phone down, now what? I don't have real friendships. My parents are working all the time, you know, trying to get the bigger house, trying to keep up with the Joneses. We don't have those sense of communities anymore. We commodify people. We look, you know, a lot of times, how many people, I mean, I'm sure you have people who aren't like this, but know people when they call you or something, you're kind of like already in that mindset of, what do you need? Oh, what's going on? You know, like you need something, because we have become this kind of transactional culture, you know, where we look at people, but we look at people as a means to an end of some
and
sort.
We're tired,
and I don't think it's malicious.
We're knackered. Yeah,
It's not
we're stressed,
malicious,
tired,
but it's
too much going on.
Yeah, because we don't have a sense of community anymore. We don't have a sense of real, true purpose, and a purpose even just that's unique to you as an individual. Like, what's your purpose in the world? You know, what do you want to do in the world? How do you want to show up and show out we don't have that anymore because we're caught in this collectivism. And so the phones are a great escape, but I do feel if we could offer something to them, they would eventually, of course, it's this whole trauma, so it wouldn't happen overnight. But if they had something, a group of real friends, real connections, real friendships, to come out back to, then it wouldn't be as hard, you know?
Yeah, but we have to kind of keep that information alive whilst they go through this process of that. Well, Richard Grannon says at the end of his podcast, whatever he does, he says, "Thank you for your time and your attention," which is the most valuable things you can give anyone.
And how
And
many
I
times have
can't
you
think of
gone
those.
out and seen a whole family together and every single person's on their phone?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think the idea now is to build little deposits of understanding, like the Nag Hammadi texts that were buried for 15, 1600 years. We're going to have to kind of create little communities of people that hold this knowledge outside of these technocratic systems, if this comes to pass, like Brave New World, in a sense of just holding it in place, this information in place, the fact that there was a world that isn't like that world, for people to kind of maybe discover, kids to discover in the future. It's not about making, I don't know, if, like changing that might change, and it might not happen, and it probably won't, because they're an absolute nightmare. These people are just a mess. But the best thing you can do is keep this information, and keep in books, keep it in knowledge, in stories, in songs, and that this world, the world that they might grow up in, wasn't always that way. And then they can have the option to go, okay, that's another way of, never used to live like that.
Yeah.
It's just thinking about a few hundred thousand, maybe even 1,000 years in the future. It's not about what is going to happen right now. It's keeping the spark of what it is to be human alive for generations to come. And it might go away for a while, but it'll always be there to be found. That's the people that in the mindset of the people that buried or put those Nag Hammadi texts in that cemetery. They knew that was going to be there for a long, long time, but they knew that it needed to be found for future generations. That's what we need to do. That's what we do in these conversations, and that's what we do with the books. That's what we do with these films. There needs to be a way of preserving the fact that the world wasn't always like what they want it to be. Because if that ever does happen, they need to understand one time down in the future that there is another way. There was always another way, and we can't let that die, even if it fades away for a little while.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you can instill that education, because then you can figure out your own sense of self through that education, you take what resonates, what doesn't. We just need to provide an environment where that can be expressed, because that's another thing I just see. And we could go down that whole rabbit hole, which we don't have to, but I want to be respectful of your time. But it's just,
Okay.
you come out and, like when somebody says, I want to be an artist or I want to be a photographer, most people are like, okay, yeah, no, what do you really want to do? Because we don't have like a sustainable environment where people can do that. It's very rare if you can.
Because they're thinking, I want to be a famous photographer or a famous artist. I want to be a
That's true.
famous
I never thought
singer,
about it
a
that
famous
way.
songwriter. If you want to be a songwriter or a photographer, pick up a camera and take a photo or write a song. That you're not talking
That's
about. I want to be a filmmaker. Go and make a film. You want to be known to be a filmmaker, known to be an artist, known to be a writer. That's a completely different thing. That's feeding into your avatar.
That's just
That'll
lack of
happen.
knowledge
That'll
too,
happen
though.
if you're good at it. Like, well, probably not, because I mean the system's corrupt in a sense. You will only get so far. But if you're doing it for the love of doing it, you'll just do it anyway. There's a difference there. There's a love of doing it, and there's the love of showing people that you're doing it. And I think they're two different levels. I don't think one's wrong. I just be honest about what you actually want. If you want to be famous to be a singer, then you want to be a famous singer. If you want to be a singer, you'll go and sing somewhere in front of a few people. There is a difference. And neither one are right or wrong. Just be honest with yourself what you actually want.
But wouldn't it be so wonderful to have a community where that could be like totally on the table in the mainstream world? And everybody, not every, I mean, okay, now I sound a little too, I don't know, whatever, hokey, but it would be nice where people could have the opportunity to understand who they are as unique individuals, what really makes them tick, what gift they have to give to the world of themselves, and then feel like they could feasibly do it, and be comfortable and be understood by most folks. It just feels like when you do that stuff, you're on the fringe. And maybe I'm just speaking for myself, but it's not considered something that's normal. It's like, no, you get a job in corporate America, or you become a doctor or a lawyer or whatever. And you just live your life that way. So I would love to see more of us doing things, not just consuming things.
I think the kind of a telling word to use was give to the world. Again, it's kind of creeps in without us knowing it. It's give to the world. Well, why would the world need to give a shit what we're giving to them? Like, you shouldn't need to give it to the world. You just give it to your mate, or do it because you want to do it on your own. It's again this whole psychology. We've been brainwashed to think that we need to tell the whole world needs to have a look at what we're doing.
It's
Like,
so
it doesn't need to be like that's.
I just learned something, Richard.
But that's a lot of that's a lot of pressure to put on yourself. Like, everybody has to be a #1 best-selling author. Everyone has to be like, that is mad. That is a madness like thing to do. That's like, I want to be like the best. I want to be #1 in the charts. I want to be the I don't know. I want to be the best at something, but I want the world to know it. That is an insane amount of pressure to put on someone. It's not the pressure you would put on your kid. So why would you put it on yourself? Why would you know what I mean? Why would you abuse yourself with that amount of pressure to go, I want to do this to be seen as the best or #1 in the world at this? Why would you do that to yourself if you would never tell your child to do that, or your niece to do that, because you wouldn't want to put the pressure on them. So why would you do it to yourself? We're brainwashed to think, I got to give this to the world. Well, unfortunately, I don't think the world gives a shit. They're too busy trying to give their stuff away to the world. I've written about 4 books. I've never released any of them because no one really gives a shit what I'm saying. And I'm still learning. Why am I writing a book? I get halfway through it and I think, why am I writing this? I don't know it. What I'm doing is I'm jotting out my notes and thinking that other people give a crap about my mental process.
But then don't err to then that's just the polar opposite.
No, but I might do when I'm in my 60s, when I've learned this stuff, but I'm still learning this stuff. And it's actually, I want to put it out because
I was publishing a book, The Greater Good. What happened to that?
I've written it, but
is it published though?
No, because I've written it because it's a research project for me. When I look at it, I'm like, I was learning this stuff.
Podcast where you said you were coming out with a book, so you were.
And I was going to, but then I realized that I was only doing it because I wanted to be seen as an author. I'm not ready to write anything. I don't know anything more than it's already out there. So I want to.
It's still a unique expression of you. It's not necessarily, and I'm trying not to.
But I can do that for myself. I don't need to express it to anyone else.
But you had an inclination to write that book and publish a podcast where you told your audience you were going to publish that book.
But all the information in it is stuff that I'm still learning, and I kind of don't want to add to the noise. So when there'll be a point where I feel like
I'd like to get it.
But there'll be a point where I feel like that, okay, there's a point where I can actually add something to it. But at the moment, it's a thought process. And I don't feel like it adds anything other than to the noise.
But that's just your opinion.
It is, but I'm the one publishing it. So I kind of feel like I want to learn. I'm learning so much as I go that everything in it 6 months later is, I think, completely different thoughts.
But isn't that true of everything that comes out? I mean,
probably.
I feel like you're kind of doing the same thing, but the inversion of it. And that's just my opinion. I mean,
possibly.
You're nobody cares. Not a person cares. I don't have one original thought in this book. Like, it's not going to make a difference. It's not, but it is, because it's your expression of what's important to you, what you've researched, so that's kind of what I was getting at when I said that. It's like, it may not, maybe 100 people might read that book, but you don't know. There could be one person in that 100 people that are like, carry that book under their arm every day, have it, dog-eared and highlighted.
I get that.
And it could change their life, because every generation's coming up. They don't necessarily know about David Icke. They don't necessarily know about Dean Henderson. They don't necessarily know about like Wayne McCrory. They don't. If they found you, they like glitch in the code. And, it's like when you listen to a rap song and they're sampling a song, And you see the kids get, and I'm like, oh, I know this song. This original song's so much better than that song. And they're like, I don't know. I like this song. This song's everything to me. I play it every day. So, that's kind of what I meant. Like, it doesn't matter if you're saying this. I mean, that's what the world is based off of, right? Just reimagining old ideas. Otherwise, there is, are there any more original thoughts? I don't know. But, like I'm doing this podcast, like I'm the first person ever. And I almost psyched myself out of not doing it because I thought that way, because I was like, well, my God, there's so many podcasts out there. Who gives a crap about what I have to say or the information I'm trying to get out into the world? Because so many other podcasters have done that. I mean, I was intimidated when I saw your podcast, to be quite honest, because to me, your podcast in comparison to mine is, mine looks like dog do. It's so like
mine's in this room. It's the same. I'm just on the other side of the screen.
It's not about the look and feel. It's just you're like on another level. You got these people that I would love to interview on speed dial. And they look, I ask, and it's like, oh, how many followers do you have? Like 2 subscribers. So it's just, that's the way it goes. So I will just personally say, this is not meant to be a session between us, because I know we're still recording, but that was on my list of things to ask, because I'm like, when's this book coming out? Because I want to see this book. I mean, I want to read this book. But
no, it's a good thing to hear. I mean, it's one of those things that now you've said that it kind of does make you think of different things. But when you write it 6 months later, you think different things. And it's such a long process. I don't think that I'm to the point where I'd like to be with my understanding of what I'm writing about at the moment. And also, it's your intent to doing it. Why are you doing it? I really enjoy writing. I actually really enjoy the process of writing. So
that's all
I learn a lot from the actual writing process of it. Basically, it was the research was done. But I like the concept of the greater good is a great concept of the fact this is obviously a greater good cult, and that needs to be put across, that this is a cult for the greater good, everything for the greater good, one hive mind, and that is cult like to its core. And when we saw that the COVID thing running out, everything was about sacrificing your own wants and needs for the greater good, which that is a cult to its core. That absolutely is. You would put a mask on your face and cause yourself all sorts of issues to stop someone else getting a cold that you don't think they could even get. And it turns out that actually, that if you're asymptomatic, you can't pass it on anyway, which we knew because it's ridiculous. And we all, so the concept was there.
And the context is unique. It's a unique contextualization of old knowledge, that people need more than ever right now, honestly. So, and that's what I'm saying, where I want people to be, I wish we had more of a community where we didn't think like that, because where you're saying, I was thinking, oh, get it out to the world. I kind of didn't mean it like that. I just mean it's out to the world where anyone could discover it if they wanted to.
Sure. Yeah. I get what you mean. Yeah. It's just the wording gets
upon
in.
it.
Yeah.
And say like, oh, I never saw this before. I'm really interested in this. It changed my life. Like, how somebody like David changed my life. How I came to find him was the most bizarre thing. Robert Kiyosaki talking about some guy getting banned on his friend's Brian Rose live stream. And I didn't even know who he was. I had no interest. I was like, I don't know why, but that struck my curiosity. And I said, who got banned? Like, what's that all about? And then my whole life changed after that. I mean, I'm not saying he's a god to me or anything, but my whole life changed because that one person presented some information to me that was very old, to be honest, but I just never knew about it because I never thought about these things.
Sure.
And so you could be that person. And for one person, I still think that's like that's a victory right there. So we can't look at it as like nobody cares or don't think everybody's going to care, because it's not. It's like kind of the long tail.
Yeah, no, I get that. There's a middle ground.
If you don't put it out there, and if you don't express yourself, and if you don't, I haven't done this, by the way, so I'm being completely hypocritical right now, because I was always taught, like, nobody cares about your passion. Like, just make money, be a success. And I followed that trajectory thinking, and it's a very empty sense of gratification at the end of the day, because it's a bottomless pit. You're never happy because it's like, well, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? And I wish we had an environment that was more, hey, who cares if you have 10 diehard followers or supporters? You're still being you. You're being true to yourself. Like most societies don't support that. They're like, that's great, but when are you going to grow up and get out into the real world? What do you real? And if we had those kind of environments that were more supportive of that, then we would still follow that path, even if it meant not being a megastar or a best-selling author. We would still honor that craving inside of us to kind of express our unique selves.
Yeah.
And it's just ourselves. It's not a unique idea or a unique film, or it's just, this is our spin on that, you know. And it's kind of going back to that whole thing, like how we're all connected. We're just unique points of attention, which once again, David says that, but I can't help it. I love him. So so many of his principles are so applicable in a lot of these conversations, you know. We're all one, but we're unique points of attention. We're not unique. We're just unique points of attention. And sometimes we could be saying the same thing, but maybe the way I say it turns people off, and the way you say it, you're saying the same thing, really inspires someone and intrigues them and makes them want to keep going further down the line and know more. So
yeah, it's just that the whole COVID narrative was full, I think, at the time. But I mean, there's so much more that goes on to it, and I'm far more interested in the occult philosophies behind it and why people believe these things. It's so bizarre. So I'm sure I'll publish something someday in the future, but not for a while yet. I want to just carry on doing the deep dive, interviewing people, and that's how I get to know these things and learn these things. I buy their books, I read their stuff, and I go and chat to them, and there'll be a point where I can pass that kind of mix of all that knowledge on somewhere else, but it'll be a while yet. And I'm just enjoying doing deep dive at the moment, enjoying doing the podcast, meeting people like yourself, chatting to Gaz about weird stuff, and seeing behind of all just the people that I get to meet is quite incredible, really. It's just odd. Life is odd. But once you do start, and I will say that once you do start kind of knocking on these doors, there is a flow behind you that you start to meet people that you're supposed to meet, and you start to interview people. And once you get in that slipstream, it does, if you're supposed to be in that one and you'll know it, things do just start happening for you, and you start meeting people, and you start things like I started Iconic with Jamie and Gaz. That was Jamie and Gaz wanted to do that. I met going back to the start, I met Gaz at his dad's event. I asked him if we could do a podcast together, glitching the code. We did it about a month later. I think we met in London to do some filming, and then we went to Scotland together for a week and did some filming. And then about 8 months, then I did an interview with him and his brother, and we started chatting, and they wanted to do this Iconic thing. And I said, look, if you want to do this, let me know. About a year before we even started it, let me know, and I would like to get involved and help you do the filming, because I had no one who could do any of the creative filming side. And about 9-10 months later, we filmed the first bit of content in Derby, and me, Gaz, Jamie, and Gina at the time. There was another lad there who left, and he has actually come back. We started Iconic as a tiny little thing they had a podcast, but we started just making film content. The website was completely different from what it is. And in 2.5 years, it's grown to something absurd. I think there's about 17 members of staff in a massive office and two TV studios now. And that has happened. Like, you just don't understand how. I mean, there's money behind it, that helps, but also just the actual getting things just came together at the right time. And we get on really well. We have very, very similar views and agree on everything, but we agree on a lot of things. But we have the same goal, which is to keep this information circulating at a time when they're trying to suppress it. And that has kind of like really propelled us forward. But again, it came together very, very organically and very, very quickly. And it's just incredible just to go on it and see the amount of people. We've got people we met in New Zealand that come over and working with us. We're working with people that you see in the mainstream media all the time. I mean, I think it was only about 2 days after Peter McCullum was on Joe Rogan, I interviewed Peter McCullum. And you're like, that's mad. But it's the nature of, one, I think, synchronicity, but also the internet helps, because you can bridge gaps that you can never bridge before. So yeah, if you keep doing what you're in with the right people, and you will be chatting to a lot more people. And I'll make sure that you get some contacts. If you want to chat to anyone, just let me know and I can get the.
I would love that. I'm
Yeah.
definitely, Dean Henderson is on my list for sure.
He's great. Yeah. I'll try and introduce you. He's great. Really nice guy.
But yeah, I don't want to take up too much of your time because
That's okay.
we've got, I love this. And I really want to say thank you so much for giving me your time and attention
You're all right.
and for all that you do, that you put out there. I've been lucky enough to have conversations with you and with Jamie and with Gareth and with Christiana.
Yeah, she's great.
Who is amazing. Where can people, I'm going to be taking notes on this question. Where can people find you, Richard?
Iconic.com is where most of my shows go, but I mean, yeah, just iconic.com. Obviously, I'm on Instagram. It's the only social media I've got. I'm on BitChute, Glitch in the Code, and YouTube I'm back on, which no one watches on YouTube anyway. So YouTube for the time being, BitChute, and most of my stuff goes on iconic.com. And it's social media wise, I'm only on Instagram anyway. So, but they're the only places that you can find me. Most of the stuff I say goes on iconic.com because I'm trying to just funnel as much content in there and help build that as possible. And it's it's full on making content, weekly content for that. So yeah, BitChute, you'll find them all. Spotify and Apple Podcasts put out the podcast versions of Glitch in the Code, WhatsApp with Gaz. And I do a show called Across the Pond with a friend of mine, Mark Malone. So once a month we do that one, and he updates me about the madness in America, and I talk about the madness in the UK. So we do that once a month, and that's on Spotify, BitChute, and Apple Podcasts. So you'll find out there. Yeah, Glitch in the Code, Across the Pond, Deep Dive, and WhatsApp. They're the main shows that I do on a weekly basis. It's enough to keep me going.
Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah. You got your hands on a lot of stuff there.
Yeah.
Well, can you hang on for 1 second?
Yeah, sure.
We're going to end this. And
okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for asking me.
Oh, my pleasure.